talking about race and culture and like interracial relationships and subjects that like might be viewed as somewhat like difficult or bold to talk about. I like taking those issues and then putting a comedic and heartwarming spin on it.
Reclaiming representation features the voices of artists whose identities are often marginalized, tokenized, or excluded from mainstream art culture. It's an opportunity for us to learn about their lives and work while reflecting on the role of art and artists in dismantling systems of oppression. And so it's also an excuse for me to like talk to artists that I really admire, artists whose work is honest and authentic and gives voice to their experiences. And so I want to introduce everyone to Liann Kaye. She is the director of a new series called The Blessing, and it is on YouTube right now if you guys want to go and watch it right after this. It is such a like beautiful like short series about this couple and talks about culture and that transition to marriage. And so today I really want to talk about your experience as a filmmaker and kind of how you got to where you are right now. And I also want to talk about like what is next for you as well.
So hello everybody, my name is Liann and I am a Chinese American filmmaker who somewhat recently started my venture into narrative filmmaking. For a long time, I was doing video editing at many different corporate and nonprofit companies across New York City. Maybe my journey goes back to, I think, a really common Asian American experience, which is that your parents came from another country, risked everything to bring you here, to give you all the opportunities, and when my sister decided to become a musician, promptly lost their minds and were very disappointed. And so I, as a reaction to that, decided to go the safe route and got a job with the salary and a 401k and just like really tried to be a good Chinese daughter. All the while like directing music videos for my sister and doing things that were art adjacent until at some point, I was just like, I really, really, really want to branch off and make a narrative film. And so I quit my job and I didn't tell my parents. And I decided to just try to make a film. And so the first film that I made was The Blessings pilot, which was a standalone short film about a guy that wanted to propose to his girlfriend, but had to get the blessing of her immigrant Chinese mother first. And that was just a 6-minute piece that I made and submitted to festivals and did the film festival circuit, and then used that film to apply for a grant through the New York City Women's Fund for female musicians, filmmakers, and entertainers, and won the money to serialize the story. So I made 5 more episodes, and in that difficult, the protagonist gets to continue his journey and he meets the dad, the grandma, the stepdad, the sisters, the aunties, like all the way up until the proposal. And so through that, I had a finished project, and then I submitted that to Series Fest and met my managers in the break room. And so now I'm signed to Issa Rae's management company, Color Creative, and it's very exciting. So moving forward, I'm looking to do more features and television shows, and yeah, be a writer director is the ultimate goal.
So when I saw that you had mentioned that, I was like freaking out. Like that is so cool.
I was too, definitely.
I think you've done such a great job at marketing your.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I want to know, like, is that something you're really proud about? That's how I saw your work. Like,
yeah.
I saw a video you made on TikTok, and like you're like, I'm watching how you market The Blessing through the YouTube videos, the tea time, TikTok, and like it is so on point. Like it's very smart. It's very good.
Thank you. No, I am really proud of it, and I think it's been such a meaningful lesson in what it is to be an artist, like in this world, because I think, of course, like the ultimate goal someday is to be able to make the product and then have the engine behind you that other people will be able to hire, like a PR team and a social media person and editors that do the stuff for you, and a digital strategist that like makes the posters and the art and like really brings the whole thing together. And it's funny because like when I made the short film, you always think like, oh, and then I'm going to get money for marketing, and then I'm going to have other people do it. And then, it just like never really works out that way. And you're like, okay, so I am going to do it this time so that I can make the next bigger project. And then that time I will have like more support. And not to say that I didn't have support, because like in making the project itself, the blessing itself, like I had a bigger team than I'd ever had before. And I got to have a producer. And I think like every little step forward, you keep building upon the team. But it is also like you really can't anticipate all the stuff that does go into it. And I think that's something that I was trying to communicate on my TikTok videos, which is another like new adventure for me because I like hadn't been on TikTok before. But like people kind of like ask for tips, and I think what I found is that being an indie artist, like an independent artist, it really is so much more than just making the art if you're going to be strategic about getting the art out there. And so I think documenting the process and sharing with people, making the film couldn't come before writing the essays about the film and applying to the grants to get the money for the film, and doing the mood boards and like really planning it out so carefully so that anyone who was going to give you money like knows exactly what you're going to do. And then even after that, all the assets around the film after it's out to kind of show people what it is and why they should watch it, and taking like little pieces of the film and chopping it up. And I guess I would say I don't think I'm late in my arrival to narrative filmmaking, even though I do know people that like, graduated from college and then jumped right into Hollywood in their early 20s. And they went the route of like being a writer's assistant and being a PA and kind of like working their way up through the ranks. Whereas I went to New York and did like indie music video directing and then working at corporate and nonprofit companies. But I think that gave me a lot of training in learning how to do a social media marketing campaign and, working with people, and also just like observing what goes on Instagram and how people, really push out products. And so, yeah, it's been a big learning curve and stuff that like I've been amassing over the years. And also just finally being able to do it for my own project, because I'd spent many, many years doing it for other people's. So I would say that knowing the Adobe suites has been a big, big, big advantage. Like knowing how to use Photoshop and Illustrator. And these are things you can learn too. Like you can go on YouTube and watch.
Can we talk about how
Yeah.
expensive the Adobe suite is?
Like, yeah,
it is a joke how expensive it is.
But there are ways that.
What are the ways? What are the ways?
Like, definitely share it with somebody. And like that's kind of annoying because like they only let you have 2 logins, but you like basically when you're in, you can like kick the other person out. And then when they log back in, they kick you out. And like there's go offline. There's also like if you worked at a company, like you can stay in their login for as long as they'll let you. Students can get access to it, and also write it all off in your text.
Yes, yeah. So I just like finished binging Love is Blind, and I do not support the show. I do not support the concept. Like I hate it so much, but it like shows us so much about how our culture views marriage and love and attraction, and not in a good way. But the thing that so like when I was going into The Blessing, like when I watched the pilot, I saw like the first episode, I was like, a story about a white guy going into a relationship. Like I felt like I've had enough. Like, okay, we'll see where this goes. But the thing I loved about it was like, it's not the romantic love that I find that interesting, but it's like the familial love and like getting to see how each family member loves like the main character and each other different. Like that was like so beautiful and interesting to me. especially like the relationship between the sisters, and getting to hear you kind of like bounced off your career with your sister, and her work. Like that is a story I think that isn't told very often, the family aspect to relationships.
A couple of things on that, like, and it's something I didn't even realize until I interviewed Kathy, who plays Trixie in episode 4, and also Charlotte's daughter on Sex and the City, which I didn't know until like after she did the blessing. But she was saying when she watched the sister episode, like she really tracked that as immigrant kids who have this like generational divide with our parents, and like sometimes a cultural divide, sometimes a language divide, that you really bond with your siblings in a way that maybe that is very unique and very strong, and you kind of do have to look out for each other as if like you are each other's parent in this new world, in this new America that our parents like didn't grow up in. And so seeing that resonate with other, at least Asian women, like the sister bond with her and the girl that plays my sister in the movie. She's in Hamilton, the musical. And of course, like that inspiration of Angelica and Eliza, and you know, just that song, like I love my sister like I love my own mind. It's just, it's a really beautiful and strong thing. And I think like you're right that a lot of heteronormative romantic stories between a man and a woman have been done and done and done. I'd argue that not enough have been done like by women from our perspective, and like I'm excited to see that come out. But then yeah, on top of that, like the love and like unconditional love can come from many other places in your life, and that it can be more complex. And in a way that kind of started when my sister wrote me a song, like back in maybe 2016 or something. And like that wasn't really something I think either of us had seen before, like a pop star writing a song for their sister. And like that song made me cry. And in a way, it like, this is kind of our, I think, artistic journey, like supporting each other and loving each other in that way.
Yeah, and I'm glad you pointed that out. Like 1,000%, very few stories of heterosexual romantic love is told from the perspective of women. And even like if women do it, it's like we are so, I want to say, like polluted by the idea of like heterosexuality and patriarchy, that like it's very hard to even tell her own story without like falling into those traps too. Yeah.
My biggest pet peeve in any romantic story is love at first sight. I just hate it. I like can't believe it. I can't get on board once the people like.
Yeah, and the thing that I started realizing once I like really started thinking about the prevalence of like abuse in relationships is a lot of these tropes that we see in romantic comedies and love stories, it's like setting up people for abuse.
Which another show that I love, I think that Crazy Ex-Girlfriend does that so well in undoing the tropes that women think are supposed to be romantic. And I think that the way that Rachel Bloom diagnosed her was that like she's addicted and obsessed with romantic love from like how the media told her it was supposed to be. And I just thought it was brilliant. It's my favorite TV show.
I want to like kind of focus on you as an artist. What of your works do you feel like best represents you as an artist?
It is hard to pick one because it's like picking your favorite child, I would say. Yeah. But I guess getting signed, the goal has been to come up with, I guess, like as many ideas as I possibly can. I would say that I love AAPI stories, and I think like even like giving myself permission or realizing that that was like what I could bring to the table. Because, you know, even in college when I did my senior thesis, it was like a white protagonist, which is like fine. Like I'm still happy to write white protagonists, but I think that kind of came out of me being like, well, it can't be an Asian one because like I've never seen one on the screen, or like I and now like looking back on that, I'm like, no, like Asian protagonists are actually all I want to write about. And like those stories are really, really interesting to me, with like the intergenerational lens of like what happened to our parents, why are we this way, and the complexity of being Asian and American. And then for me, I think my zone is, I guess, put it this way, like talking about race and culture and like interracial relationships and subjects that like might be viewed as somewhat like difficult or bold to talk about. I like taking those issues and then putting a comedic spin on it and putting a heartwarming spin on it, that to where it's like talking about this stuff doesn't have to be traumatic always, and it doesn't have to be like, there are a lot of upsetting things that are like happening specifically to people of color and Asian Americans right now in the wave of anti-Chinese sentiment and the pandemic and COVID and what that's done to our community. But I don't think like sitting inside our trauma is always what we need. Like, I think absorbing these like social messages can be entertaining and make you think in a way that like humanizes us and makes you want to be our friends and have fun.
And so I'm wondering if you want to talk a little bit more about like what you're currently working on. Is it mostly promoting the blessing, or like what is like your everyday like work cycle look like?
Yeah. I think like alongside making the blessing, I'd been doing a lot of work in applying to like screenwriting contests. And so I have like a feature film that I have like put through. One of them is called the Athena Lab, and that one is like a female screenwriter lab in New York City at Barnard College. And they, let you workshop with 8 women, like read each other's screenplays, and then also give you mentors. And so one of my mentors at the Athena Lab was Sophia Alvarez, who wrote To All the Boys I've Loved Before. So that was really cool. And then that same screenplay is now in the Blacklist residency. The Blacklist is a website created by this executive, Franklin Leonard. And he was like a Black Hollywood executive that felt like there weren't enough diverse screenplays, or I would even say like good screenplays. He was like, there just aren't any good screenplays that I'm reading right now. And so he took like a survey, like went out to all of his friends and was like, what are you reading right now that you like, that's unproduced? And so then they all, like sent him in. And then now every year they like rate the best screenplays on the Blacklist. And it like those, like, I think the top 10 like all get made, or people are like trying to poach those once they get rated. So they started doing more diversity initiatives, and so I'm in the female filmmaking feature residency for that, like with my screenplay. And so, and I guess I describe those 2 labs because those are largely where I found my tribe of writers that I love working with every day. And so we do like writing dates where we get on Zoom and we're like, what are you working on? What are you working on? And then we're like, cool. And then we turn off our microphone and then we like write, just like accountability, every day. And then the best part too is just like having someone that'll read your pages over and over and over again and give you notes. So I would say I have like 5 projects like kicking around, 3 like TV shows and 2 movies. At this stage, it is kind of a mixed bag of like what I should be doing truly. Like, one of my features is completely written, and like that's actually really good because then you can like send it out and be like, this is done. But sometimes they might pay you to write it if you give them the idea. So like that's also another thing that you have to like write a treatment. So then you have like your log line and what is the movie and who are the characters, and like kind of break it all down then. And then if they want it, then like maybe you'll keep talking. Every day I'm coming up with ideas and writing them down and pushing forward.
Do you do much engagement with your audience on TikTok? TikTok is such like a different like each platform has its own like different like social etiquette almost. And I'm curious like what you think about like the TikTok platform.
I do have thoughts on this. I'm on like a couple platforms, but the main ones are probably Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. And Facebook, people are older and they, I think, have been much more vocal about like, why aren't you telling a story about an Asian woman and an Asian man? To which I like actually just like addressed today. And it took a lot of like centering and being like, I'm not responding to like make everybody happy, but these are my reasons. Whereas Instagram's like my friends, so I haven't gotten like anything like that on there. And then TikTok, I think, is like much more like younger Gen Z and progressive and like not as bothered by, the issues of like interracial mingling and such. So I think there's definitely like a clear age demographic between the platforms. And I also think that people spend time on TikTok, I think, to gather information. Like I follow some screenwriters that are like, this is like what I do, and this is like what I've learned. And I think people have the attention span to like listen a little bit. It kind of reminds me of at least my channel, like doing behind the scenes commentary on like DVDs when that was a thing. My goal with the blessing is not necessarily to like, if it doesn't go viral, like my career's over. Like I actually think that the blessing has accomplished what I set out to do, which was to like get managers. And so now I think that I'm promoting it because I want people to see it and not because I need monetary. I mean, I'd love monetary compensation, but I don't like need it to quote unquote, I guess, like do well or succeed. I want it to do well, but
you're doing it because you want to and not because you have to, I guess is how I see it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Another thing I'm really curious about is like I see like the importance of like all of these applications and festivals are to like your career now. And it's like, how do you find and cultivate those opportunities? Also, what feelings do you feel during that process and how do you manage those feelings?
Yeah, that is a good question. I think that the contests do help. There are contests out there that you can apply to, and sometimes they cost money, but sometimes they don't. And the top ones, like whoever wins, like people do have an eye on. And agents and managers and people like will reach out to you and be like, I saw that your thing won this. Do you want to have a meeting, etc. That hasn't happened to me because I haven't done honestly like that many contests, but I have done labs and fellowships, which I love. I like some of the best things that have ever come from applying to all these things have been just the people that I've met in the labs, because I think that other writers that really understand you like do become lifelong friends. And you know, I'm not in school anymore, but I love workshopping and reading and talking about like character and psychology and theme. Like that's just like really fun for me. And so I would recommend for anyone that just like wants a great artistic experience to do a workshop or a lab or a fellowship. Those are absolutely fantastic. But with the contests like Nichols or Screencraft or Coverfly, like any of those, like I do have friends from the labs that apply to all of those. And then, you know, when and if they get up on the list, I do think those are helpful for them.
Have you actually gotten to meet Issa Rae?
I have not, and I don't necessarily expect to. Like she's such a busy lady.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know, maybe like, but you know, I'm definitely like at the beginning of my career where she's like a queen running an empire. But I will say that she's the reason that I did do a web series, because I was so inspired by Awkward Black Girl. I just loved her path, and I've thought about her a lot like on this journey, because you know, being a woman making things, and especially like being a woman, and I don't think my concept is like edgy by any means, but obviously like there are going to be trolls on the internet that don't like it. And I thought a lot about like what she must have had to deal with like when she was putting out her web series, and like how controversial it must have been. So I think being under the care of somebody that gets that, even with just the team that she's hired. I mean, she has 3 companies basically. It's like Issa Rae, and then she has Hooray, which is the production company, Radio, which is the record label, and then Color Creative, which is the management company. And so, you know, it's like a big empire. I do think that she's really aware of how difficult it is for women of color, or people of color, to break into the industry. And I think it's really cool that she's doing something about it, you know, like really trying to use her power and influence that she gained all herself. Like she had to fight tooth and nail to just like be the trailblazer in, and then she's helping other people get their voices out. And I think that that is very, very cool and inspiring. So
yeah, and that's something that I've thought a lot about too, like with this podcast, and like thinking about representation. I think often we think of representation as like someone else representing but like, and I'm thinking about this in like when we think about like the revolution too, it's like we can't like wait for like these systems and these institutions to like accommodate us, because they never will. Like that is not their intention. It's very much like we have to build what we need for ourselves, kind of.
Right.
And I definitely see that in what she's doing. Like, she is building the system that works for people that the broader system has not worked for.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. And I mean, even if I haven't met her yet, or maybe won't for a bit, it like, she knows like the power her name has. Like, for like, definitely like when I'm in meetings, her people are always like, you know, like,
it worked on me. I'm like, dude,
there you go. Yeah, there you
Issa
go.
Rae.
And I think that's really huge. Like, even if, you know, like, she doesn't have the time to like meet with everybody personally, it's like she knows the influence that she can have like with the people that are under her umbrella. So
1000%. And also, if she does feel socially awkward talking to people, it's like,
I mean,
I will create the path for your career, but if you could just spare me the small talk, that would be great. Thanks.
I mean, I'm an introvert myself. I stay in my house all the time, and so I completely hear that side of things.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I wanna help, but I only have so much energy, and then I need to recharge. So
yes, yeah. How would you define like the audience that you are making your work for?
Ooh, I would say The Blessing, I would call a rom-com, like a family rom-com. And then to like expand out, I would say like an intergenerational, like ethnically specific family story. And so I think definitely Asian Americans can look at the story and like have read and experienced the story and said like, oh my God, I like recognize like durian, and like I married into this family, and I, you know, like my mom is Chinese, and things like that. But I also think that it could appeal to anybody getting married. Like anybody who's interested in romantic comedies and relationships and like being realistic about relationships, because it is, no matter what your race is, marrying somebody who has grown up with a completely different set of like ideals, like their family culture, the way that they deal with things. And I remember one of the themes that I hold like very true when I was writing the series was something somebody had told me, which was like, when you get married, all of their family baggage becomes your baggage too. And so like anything going on with their brother, anything going on with their brother's wife, like the brother's wife's parents, like all of that stuff becomes your problem to deal with. Like, they're your family. And so the idea of seeing this guy come into this Chinese family and, you know, not have it be a separation, something that I wanted to communicate in the George episode, how yes, a white man might not understand or have experienced racism, but when he has kids of color, like, he's gonna have to. And I think exploring that, like, what do you do when like your family members are experiencing this and you can't even relate to it? And vice versa, you know, like marriage is somewhat becoming part of the other person and everything in the background. So, but to answer your question, I think it might most closely hit home to people in Chinese American cultures, but I think very easily could be expanded out to anyone from any different background, like, you know, like any immigrant family, I think. And then apart from that, anybody who likes a good rom-com story about falling in love and getting married.
Are there any specific messages or like feelings you kind of hope to inspire within your viewers?
Yeah, I think something really touching when I've been interviewing all of the actors for like the after show tea time was that a lot of them were excited about getting a role that wasn't a stereotype. The guy who plays my dad, he was like, I was really relieved not to have an accent and be able to be this business shark that, you know, gets to intimidate. Same with like the women of the series, like Kathy and Stephanie, get to be like these fierce Asian women that really like hold the protagonist to task. And they're like, you know, usually in scenes, we're the submissive ones. We're the ones that like don't get enough lines. We're the best friend. We don't have our own agency. And I think that that's really important for both like Asian artists to be able to feel like we have that power, and then also for viewers to see that we're moving away from the stereotype, and that stereotype never held water in the first place. I think that the submissive Asian woman trope is so funny because it's like, have you met any Asian women? Like, I don't know any submissive Asian women. Like, most of them are very no nonsense and like dominant in whatever room they're in. I think first, undoing those stereotypes, but also showing a multitude of Asian characters. And I think this was also like a question that I've been asked too, of like, well, why is the white guy a protagonist? And I definitely thought about flipping it, but I think if I had, then you wouldn't have gotten to meet the whole cast of Asian faces in the family if it was like an Asian girl like marrying into a white family. You know what I mean? Like, I think that could be done later in season 2, but I think it was really important for me to like kind of have a conversation with each of my family members through fresh eyes of not knowing them and being able to ask questions that I've always wanted to, especially with the grandma episode, because I hadn't met my grandma. And so I think being able to write that and think about what marriage might have been like for her, which wasn't a great experience, if not a really horrifying experience, and kind of giving voice to historically the end game for many women and female characters has been to get married. And this is a show about someone that wants to get married, but that's not necessarily the path for everybody, and not everybody wants that.
I was like on that side too of like, why is it like a white male protagonist? But I think the fact that it left me feeling like disappointed that it was a white male protagonist is honestly important, because that's usually the case, and it like just feels normal. But in this case, like it felt like, no, why? And it's like, I don't know. I think if you could also make people feel that way, that is something too.
I've thought about this so much because like that is feedback I've gotten, and I respect that because I'm a minority person that wants to see more diverse faces in the media. Part of it is that I think that even though we want to see more diversity, we can't pretend that white people don't exist. And like our interactions to white people are, you know, stories that I think that we need to explore and conversations that we need to have. And I think largely the blessing does turn into sort of how to be a good ally 101, and like what Leo does. He comes in, he asks questions, he listens, he doesn't like try to dominate, and he gets to feel like a minority for the first time in his life. And I think that's important too. And then on top of that, hold on, I had another point and I just lost it. Oh, so Ryan, my lead actor, said that when he was in episode 2, you know, there's the story about, I guess, me being embarrassed of my school lunches. And he was like, oh, I'd never thought about that before. And I wondered when I was in high school if there were any Asian kids that were embarrassed of their school lunches. And then in episode 5, George talks about how he didn't know how to comfort his Asian stepdaughter because she felt ugly in an all-white community. And it's like, if it was a black guy, if it was a Middle Eastern guy, like they would just get it. And I think that story of like an Asian person and a black person, or an Asian person and a brown person, like that's all interesting too. And I think that intercultural relationship is something that I would love to see explored. But I think we also should hold space for what it's like for an interracial minority white relationship, because those happen. Those are really common. And that's an experience that like we can't just like erase.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Another question that I had about you being an artist is, do you identify yourself as an artist? And then if you do, when did you start to take on that identity?
Oh my God, yes. I basically went through a crisis where I was like working my corporate job and then had a panic attack and like quit, and had to do some really deep work. So I did The Artist's Way, and I also read Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. And doing both of those books, like I did the whole like worksheet. Every week I read my new chapter, and like I reflected upon what I wanted to do, and then I did my morning pages. And a lot of going through The Artist's Way, I'm so grateful I took that time to do it, because I think being an artist can be really painful if you're not centering yourself and setting up yourself to be a healthy person before you go and start like trying to make this stuff, because it is all like, you know, exploration and digging inside like some of your most inner and traumatic emotions. And I remember a question that kept coming up when I was doing it was just like, who are you and why do you deserve to say anything? And like, why are you spending your time making something that's not gonna like be productive? And like, that's a huge part of Asian culture too. Are you making money? Like, are you being productive? Are you contributing? Are you? And art really by definition is like making something that doesn't have a reason, but then the reason is like the ultimate reason that like connects your soul to the universe and stuff. But the guilt, to get past the guilt of I'm going to spend my time doing this, it's like incredible. And so, and I think the Artist Way like does a really good job of addressing that. They're like, this is your brain trying to protect you from the unknown. And that's why like everything in your body is saying like, no, 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 don't write a story or make a painting, because like that is scary and unknown, and like we can't predict how it's going to be, and it's unsafe. And you have to retrain your brain to be like, it's okay if the story is bad, I'm not going to die, and I can, you know, keep going and moving on. But like, it was a year, I would say. It was a year of journaling and doing morning pages and forgiving myself for being so selfish to like go and make art instead of contribute to capitalism. And it sounds like you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, like there is so much there.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I also think it's also part of like the immigrant experience too.
I tell every single person to like do the artist's way, and I wish more people, I mean, it is a little, I'm sure people find it like kind of hokey with like the workbook stuff. I really feel that a lot of people could be healed if they really took the time to go through the process of forgiving themselves for wanting to make art, because I think so much about it is like, I'm no good if you're not results oriented. And I think really continuing to like draw yourself back down to, sounds cheesy, but like art is its own reward. This is important to me. And Elizabeth Gilbert like is kind of like her own offshoot of the Artist's Way, but she always says applause or not. And I love that. I'm making this applause or not. It doesn't matter, and it also matters to me.
And then I'm also curious, where do you see yourself going with your art in the future? Like, what do you want for yourself? What do you also think art and like filmmaking and creativity can do for you and do for your life and like your life's work?
I am the type of artist that does draw from my personal life, which is, I think, good and bad. And I think all artists do, but I think with my stuff, I'm a little bit more public with it. Or like some of the way that I do tell the story about the story I wrote is like inspired by true events, but like not true events. And so I will say that my fiance has been so gracious throughout this entire thing. And he's also like a very private person. And so he's like not out there making TikToks by any means or anything like that. He's just like off social media. And so I always say like, it's not a true story. And he didn't have to go around asking every person in my family whether he could propose or not. But I do think that this story was really, I didn't even know this was going to happen, but through the Artist's Way and through doing the morning pages and like journaling every day, finding the story, because there was this like 3-month period where we did break up. And so like we dated for a year, we broke up for 3 months, and then we dated for the next 5 years. And so like now we're getting married and like it's all good. But I think processing that 3-month period was good for the story, but then also good for me to like kind of go through and think, what did this do to me? What does it say about me? What does it say about him? And ultimately, I think what I got out of it was being able to think about love and partnership in a really messy and complex way. When we did break up, there was a lot of prescriptive stuff from like other people who weren't in the experience themselves saying like, oh, I could never get back together with an ex, and like if you break up it's for a reason, you know, just like a lot of absolutes, a lot of absolute statements.
Also probably projecting.
Projecting, absolutely. And so I think being able to like, one, do it for myself, like write a story where it's like the journey was worth it and I've healed that wound like through the blessing, is something that I will never regret, no matter like what happens with the project. That was something for me. And then ultimately for whoever like watches it and gets something from it, some people really like the sister stuff resonated with them, but like other parts is like, if you have broken up with someone and got back together, like the shame around that and the embarrassment of like, oh, you're going back to him, or me and my fiance look really solid now. And I would say that we are, but it's not like it's just been like, you know, happy-go-lucky like the entire time. And I wanted to be like super honest about that it's like, it's a journey and like we've been through stuff. So that was a big part for me. And I think like, as far as my art in the future, like every project I've done has been pulling out of these, you know, places of confusion and trauma and doubt. And I think holding myself to the standard of a person that like is able to go back and like reflect on my flaws. Like I'm doing a coming of age like high school movie, and I think every story starts out one way and then you realize, well, like how did I behave during that time? And then to answer your question, art is like very healing for me. Like I think being able to be honest and being able to find the tribe that you can talk to about this stuff like with no judgment, which has been like the other writers in like my blacklist group, just like sometimes people do this and it's not nice and it's messy and it's embarrassing, and it's like treating us all as humans has been beautiful. So going forward, I just like hope to make more stories about that, like honest, like pulling from my own life but relatable to other people, and like hopefully something that we can all share and talk about.
From hearing you talk about it, sounds like you still have some reservations about pulling from your own life. What is making you feel that? I don't know. I don't know the question exactly, but like what is that there?
I think that like being a public person is not something that I ever imagined I was gonna be. And you know, people like Issa Rae are the talent too. And so she's famous now. And so people like speculate about her. And then, you know, I'm a big Swiftie, and Lena Dunham. All of these women have gotten so much hate for being honest. And like, it's not like work should come without criticism, because like, sure, there are things to criticize. I just think it's difficult to be a female artist in this world, like maybe an artist of color. Like, I think opening myself up to that, especially with like, you know, comments online and stuff, like you really have to tune it out, but like easier said than done. And so I think that's maybe where the reservation comes from, of just being a public woman artist. People have opinions and they'll just throw them out there like without any nuance. And that's kind of tough because I am an introvert once again. I like to just be inside. But at the same time, I do feel like having the courage to be out there and share my story with what I'm doing on TikTok, you know, like I'm talking to people in my videos and showing them my face and my voice and my thoughts, and like that has been like highly beneficial for the series, and also frightening because that means I'm a person out there now. So that's a big thing.
Yeah, and I guess that makes a lot of sense too. Usually like writers, directors are behind the camera. Even in your series, it's like your character was like not exactly a character. Like and so like you have the option to stay behind the scenes, but you're making the decision to also like be very vulnerable and show yourself. That makes sense. Because I was curious if it's more of like your feelings of like protecting the people that interact with you in your life, like afraid that like people will not interact with you because like they don't want to be turned into a movie or something. Yeah.
No, there's that too for sure. One thing I did want to say is I do think that if you're an indie filmmaker, the best way to promote it is to show people who you are and why the project matters. And I think that people will connect with you and want to see whose voice it is. And like, I think that if that's a sacrifice I have to make to get my art out there, then like I'm into it. And I think by and large, like the response has been wonderful. So I'm happy that at least like everything I'm doing is honest and myself. Like I'm not acting or having to like, you know, give up my values or be anybody else in order to promote this. So like that's cool to me. And then as far as like protecting the people around me, like with my log line for The Blessing, like first it was like when a timid Midwestern boy wants to propose to his girlfriend, he has to go through her Chinese family first. And then, I don't know, like months after the premiere, where like the log line was everywhere, like on every social media platform, it's like, can we talk about this? Like timid and boy, like how about like a shy man? He's like, I'm a shy man. And I'm like, well, you know, with the log line, it needs to be the most attention grabbing, like hooky. And also, it's not you. Like, Leo is not you. It's like the situation that I took from us. And like, if anything, Leo is like more my personality. Like, he is very curious. He babbles a lot. He is like high energy, and he, is like moving through these things and like wants to like ask all of my family members questions that I want to ask. And like, largely my family loves David, like couldn't love him more. And he's a lot more chill and quiet, and I'm like anxious and jumpy. And so
that's such an interesting revelation, or like that's such an interesting point. That's super interesting.
Yeah, which is also why it's hard. Like, once again, I totally understand the criticisms of like having a white protagonist, but like I just, it couldn't have been an Asian one. It couldn't have been me like going around. So it's just kind of like story structure and putting the blocks in. Or, it could have, but it would have been a different story. And I wanted just like a blank slate to go in that didn't know anything about like racism and like needed to check his privilege. And so with that, we had a conversation where we were like going through all of these adjectives. None of them are flattering. You write a log line about a fictional character, like you're actually supposed to like pick their flaw, and it's supposed to be the most insulting thing that you can. But and then you're talking about your fiance, it's like you do want it to be like positive, like a handsome, daring knight in shining armor goes through the thing, but that's not like what makes it complex. And so we finally, I think, decided on big-hearted Midwesterner. Like we had to eliminate boy because he was like, I'm not a boy, I'm a man. And so like that whole thing was really funny. I think a lot about, before I met him, I just felt like I had to have a stable life and like work a corporate job and, do the white picket fence and just like, I couldn't marry a musician, like insane. And he was like on tour being a drummer. But then I think like our relationship helped me realize that I wanted to be an artist too and like venture out in this life. And so thank God he gets it. Because if I were with somebody else, then maybe they would be like, what are you doing with your life right now?
You already have enough voices in your head telling you, no, like you need the safe path, you need the prosperous path. Like you don't need one more in reality.
Totally.
Yeah. Are there any careers of other artists that you find aspirational or that you are using as guides of like how you're building your career?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Issa Rae is like a huge one, obviously, because I think her taking the YouTube path and then, having her own TV show and then like building her empire is pretty amazing. That said, I don't necessarily have aspirations to be in front of the camera. And so I look at like Greta Gerwig, like I love that she is a writer director. She did like Lady Bird and Little Women, and Lulu Wang, like The Farewell was beautiful, beautiful movie. And actually recently I've gotten into Alice Wu, who did the half of it and Saving Face, and she is an Asian American writer director that does like largely like queer rom-coms, but like really good writing and really steeped in the American experience, the Asian American experience, and I think really fearless. Like I think it was really hard to get her romantic comedy made in, I think, either the 90s or the early 2000s about a woman who is queer and then like can't come out to her Chinese family, but then her mom gets pregnant. And it's like, that's such a crazy premise and such an interesting way to explore shame in Asian families and what you owe your parents. I also love like Spike Jonze and Michelle Gondry had directed music videos before this, and I really have loved seeing people who started out in the music scene like jump over to narrative.
And I think you had mentioned in your pre-interview Mindy Kaling on that list as well.
Oh, I love Mindy Kaling. I love her. She's another actress who's just like killing it. And like I do see how being an actress, like while you're writing and directing, has really somewhat advanced their careers and empires, and I like think that's so cool. I don't know if I personally like am up for that, but I love Mindy.
And I think it makes sense now that you're saying the importance of people getting to see who you are, and that is definitely a way for them to like get their face out there, get themselves out there, so that people can like see them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It definitely helps.
So I'm curious now, after hearing all of that, like, what does being an artist mean to you?
Someone once said that like music is what feelings sound like. And I thought that that was really beautiful. And maybe there's a way to apply it to art, as like art is like the manifestation of your personal expression or your feelings. When I did The Artist's Way, once again, they think about art as being connecting with the divine, which can be kind of woo-woo, but I think it's actually helped my process a lot to think about how ideas are out there in the universe and that they come to you like asking to be like expressed, and you're the vessel to like manifest them, to bring them about into the world. And that takes a lot of pressure off the creator. And you can also get rid of your ego that way, of like, it's not like I am such a genius, but it's like this idea came to me. And a lot of times you don't know where ideas come from either. So like it comes and then you're like, as long as I'm open and ready to work and to like bring it to life, then like it chose me. It's like having self-compassion and like forgiving myself for what the culture and a capitalist society in my family and social norms have always told me was selfish. Forgiving myself and allowing myself to like do what I love and like reframe that as being very, very important for the world and not frivolous or useless.
So back to the idea concept, that I think Elizabeth Gilbert was the first person where I heard about that concept from. And it was like a really like interesting concept to me, just kind of like personifying ideas. The idea that it could go away and someone else could embody. Like I thought about that when making this podcast. It was like, I have to do it or someone else will, and I want to do it.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of that anxiety, but then also knowing that like no one can do it the way that you can. So like that gives me a lot of peace. I think like in my process, because I learned how to do the morning pages, like that does alleviate some of my anxiety of like, I know I can do stream of conscious free writing and the ideas will like come. And like that's so helpful to me when I'm writing.
And then how has the pandemic changed your professional life? Especially, I think you kind of like started in like pandemic times too.
I made the first film, the pilot, before the pandemic. And then I won the grant like a month before everything shut down, which was really crazy. And so I was like, what am I gonna do? I think it was actually good in the sense that I could rewrite all of my episodes. And so then we like shot the rest of the episodes in the pandemic. And that was like a huge learning curve with COVID compliance, masks, testing. My producer did such a good job keeping everybody safe. In some ways, like I do feel like the environment of artists making art against all odds was like a really beautiful thing to be a part of. Thank God everybody was safe. Nobody got COVID. And like the energy in the room, you could really feel the electricity of people just like really missing collaboration. I do to some extent think that the remote life has somewhat helped me. I interviewed with my managers on Zoom. A lot of things has shifted to Zoom as far as like doing generals with these studio people and stuff. And I don't know if in another life I would have had to like go to LA and like do all that stuff. Like a lot of the stuff that I've been doing has had the gift of being remote and still like being able to make the moves that I want to make. So that's been pretty cool too.
I'm also curious, you had mentioned the Instagram that you had created with your sister to the movement. I was wondering if you'd like to talk about that.
So during the pandemic, we went actually like back to Ohio to like live with my fiance's family for a bit and didn't have much to do. And of course, George Floyd happened, the Black Lives Matter movement happened. And previously, like I had worked at nonprofits before, like once again, like a lot of my training, when you talk about like how I'm marketing the blessing, came from working at companies that like did digital marketing strategies. And I was like the head of video. But with nonprofits, it can be kind of tricky because they're supposed to be politically agnostic. And if they like go too far to one side, or I know it's ridiculous. And especially because liberal or like progressive issues are often align with social justice. So frankly, like kind of frustrating not being able to just be outspoken about issues that mattered to me. And so I kind of already like had a format of how to talk about this stuff. But since it wasn't through an organization, we were like, let's just like build our own Instagram account. And so my sister's a graphic designer too. She's a musician and a graphic designer, and I'm a writer. And so once again, like a lot of this stuff just starts with like making one and then having that kind of take off. So I think the first one we did was an Asians for Black Lives graphic. And like that was just to say like, we're not Black, we're not white, but we stand behind this movement and support Black Lives Matter. And like a lot of Asian culture is about being silent and being the model minority and, you know, not keeping our heads down, which like oppresses us in a really different way. And so to just be loud and outspoken, like I think that was the first graphic, and a lot of our Asian friends at least very, very much appreciated like having something to like show solidarity. And then after that, I think like we just kind of like started breaking down issues that people didn't understand. And I think like as two Asian women, we have been accepted into white spaces pretty easily because people think we're safe and non-threatening and things. We have white friends and like good white friends, but then also, you know, are in spaces where a lot of people don't get it, such as getting asked questions such as like, why are people looting? George Floyd was one of hundreds, if not thousands of people that have been oppressed by police brutality, like have their lives taken. And to some extent, it might have been a bit presumptuous to like try to re-educate the population, but that wasn't like really our intention. Like, I think we just felt, the pandemic had locked us down. We were powerless. We wanted to like use our creative skills to like contribute somehow. You can do that with money, you can do that with your labor, but everybody in the pandemic was like locked down, so we couldn't do much. And we also like our jobs were like not there, so like we didn't have too much money to donate. And so we wanted to, I think, use our art and artistic skills to try to like contribute to the movement.
What is your overall feeling in result of like having created that and put that out there, and then like with the response? I'm curious how that has felt for you.
It's a huge responsibility to carry, and especially like since the pandemic, like our jobs picked up again and we weren't just like sitting around. It's like not easy to like continue. Like we would do one every day when we were locked down and like had nothing to do, and now it's like not as easy, and we're, I think, like putting our activism towards like other pursuits now. I think all that we could do was just try to like do our research, be bold in like what we were saying, like be fair and like stand up for what we really believed in. I do think that I'm not good at a lot of things, but one of the things that I am good at, I think, is presenting issues in a way that is easy for people to digest, not backing away from hard topics, but also like not inundating people so that they don't want to engage at all. Like I think that that's what I aim to do, like both with Welcome to the Movement and my art going forward. I think like film is so important for change, and narrative stories really can make people think about the world in a different way, or it brings us empathy. Like empathy, I think, is the big way to like make a change politically, is to like really humanize people and like make them see that they're just people that are suffering and it's not one person against the other.
And I think the biggest thing in terms of like the damned if you do, damned if you don't, is I think everyone who is doing something needs to be open to like criticism and open to like you have to go into it being humble.
And it's always the people that are criticizing you are the ones that are doing nothing. Like,
yeah,
always.
well, I guess it's more like you have to look into context of like who is criticizing you and why. Right.
I guess criticism is also like its own word, because then I would say criticism is fair and I'm open to it, and like if I got something wrong, like I do want to engage and like learn. Trolling is different than criticism. And
that's
so
true.
The people that are trolling, that don't want to listen, that just want to insult you, like those people aren't trying to be productive, and you really do have to like figure out how to not like engage with that. But, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you listen to Code Switch, the podcast, but they've done a story on Yuri Kochiyama. I don't know if you had heard that story, but it was like in terms of what we were talking about, in terms of like kind of like building alliance between Black communities and Asian American communities. Like she was an Asian woman who I'm pretty sure they said that she was like the woman who was like holding Malcolm X after he got shot, and like like it was interesting just hearing her story and kind of like talking through that connection. So I recommend, if anyone is curious on that, like listen to that episode. We'll probably link it in the resource page.
To be honest, like after the Atlanta shooting, for such a long time our culture has been to like keep quiet and be good. So to see like a bunch of Asians like coming out and just being like, one of the most touching moments of that was seeing our Black friends come out too. Somebody gave a speech, and I think talking about Yuri Kochiyama and saying, like, you guys were there for us, during George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement. Like, we saw you marching in the streets, and like, we're going to be here for you too. And like, that was so beautiful to just see like the solidarity in a country that's like trying to divide us as if we're enemies of each other, and we're really not. So it was beautiful.
Yeah, and it's especially in context of like the anti-Asian like hate that's coming out with like COVID too. I want to just explicitly say that, because like that has been a thing as well.
It's been rough. It's been scary for sure, especially the things that have been happening to Asian women lately. And that is like something I've thought about with Blessing too, like being a public person in a way, or like putting myself out there and saying things that I think a lot of people would rather, I'm not saying anything that controversial, but just like even being out there, you do like wonder like, are they going to come for me? And I hope not.
Yeah.
So
Curious, like, hear a little bit more about what your artist community is and like what kind of support benefits you and what kind of support has like helped you to be.
I think like first and foremost, my sister, you know, we've been a pair since we were little. You know, I've seen her on her artist journey being a musician like long before I even ever started mine. And like she's always been really inspiring to me and like so encouraging when I decided to branch off on my own. I think that writing, especially screenwriting, is such a tough thing because the amount of pages that you amass and to have someone read that is such a big ask. Even to have someone read sections of it and read it in a timely manner is a really big ask. And so I think really building that takes like being generous yourself. And I think that like building that bridge between other writers has been really, really important to me. And like even finding 2 or 3 people that are like there for me and I'm going to be there for them is really, really important to me. Those people I've met through like the workshops and fellowships and like specifically the Blacklist Lab. I just like love those girls. And it's the particular ups and downs of being an artist. Like you really do need support, especially like in your low points. And then on top of that, like there's my like production community. So the people that helped me shoot The Blessing, like my DP Connie, she's like one of my best friends, and on her own journey of wanting to be a cinematographer in like a really male dominated field. And she's like this little Taiwanese girl who's like fierce and knows her shit and like she's gonna go really, really far. But I think we both started branching off into taking the step of like, I'm not going to be an assistant anymore. I'm going to like helm my own project. Like that was really inspiring to do at the same time as her. And on The Blessing, it's like, she's head of the camera department, I'm directing. And like, that was really cool. And on top of that, my producer Joyce, she found me on Facebook on like the Asian Creative Network, but she like has her own network of like all of these people that she pulled into the project to like hire and like do production with me. And largely because of her, like we had this whole community of people, you know, on indie rates and like in an indie situation, but like seeing people just like gather because they were like inspired was really, really cool.
I think it goes along that same vein of like what we're talking about with creating representation for each other. And I think about that relationship between you and your sister. Like you're using your skills to benefit her by creating music videos for her. And then she's like giving you opportunities to be able to like get your like experience and like art out there. And
well, on top of that too, she scored my series. Like she did the score and her songs all like play in the credits, which was awesome. Like that was a great collaboration. It's like she's actually a really great visual artist herself. So she like will do title design. She did the title design for like my web series, and it's like it's just been cool to see like the support that she was able to like bring to my project after, you know, me doing her music videos for years. But like even on top of that, like her and my fiance, like sometimes support shows itself in like not even using like your highest skills. Like being a PA on set isn't fun, but you know, they wake up at like 6 a.m. They come to set, they like help set out food, they go on a coffee run, they throw away trash. Like that's like the real like expression of love and like helping out with projects on the menial tasks that like nobody wants to do.
Another question in terms of support, how have you been able to financially support yourself throughout this process? How do we as artists find ways to like subvert capitalism and like create a world that is like anti-capitalist and actually built for humans?
Yeah, absolutely. On one hand, like we're all fucked and the government doesn't support us. And on the other hand, I think Elizabeth Gilbert has a really good chapter on this in her book. She really resisted letting art pay for her life until it was like undeniable. Like she's like Eat, Pray, Love sold like, I don't know how, like millions of books, and then she could like actually live. But before that, she like always kept a different income stream. And then I think she even like wrote a letter to herself that was like, I will never burden my art with forcing it or expecting it to provide for my life, because that would ruin my art. And I like will always take care, instead, I will always take care of my art. Like, and I will provide for it financially, and I will make sure that it is okay. And I think that's a really beautiful way of thinking about it, because I have seen people like ruin their art by putting so much pressure on it that like it doesn't become what they want it to be. And if I'm going to be really, really, really honest, like many of the projects that have moved my career forward, or people have like went to my website or portfolio and went like, oh, I really like your work, weren't projects that I made money on. Like they're projects that I funded like through other means. And so to answer your question, I am a video editor and have always been. Like right out the gate of college, like I knew that like making money video editing was going to be the way that I was going to support myself. And so I did that as just like assistant editor, associate editor, like at a fashion agency, at the Girl Scouts, at the Blue Man Group. And then when I got hired by Global Citizen, I was like the lead video editor. And then I like did the corporate thing for a bit, and I like got promoted and moved up the ranks, and like had this whole situation where it was like my boss left and I knew I could do his job. And so I was like, you know, give me his job, or I did his job for a while, and they weren't like giving me the title or the paycheck. And I like went in like guns blazing, like, because, you know, once again, nonprofit. I was like, if you are a feminist organization, like you will put your money where your mouth is. And they eventually listened, which was good. And so then I was like director of video, which was like a pretty high position for like my age, but I knew I could do it. And like, I learned a lot, and like, it was a great experience. And then when I left, they still like kind of needed me to like help judge like the transition over. And so I like freelanced for them for like a couple years too. And like that was on a day rate. And then also like connections I made through Global Citizen of people who had left Global Citizen and then like branched off to start their own companies, like hiring me. And then in the pandemic, I like started doing live streaming with my fiance and would live shoot concerts. So I am always in the video realm. I like hope someday that I can make money and like do my thing, but realistically, like I'm always happy to have that skill and cultivate that skill so that I can always, support myself.
Yeah, I think that is like an interesting addition to like the conversation of what burden does commodifying your art.
Yeah.
But also it's like, what burden does needing money do to your ability to make art? Like,
totally. And I don't really have an answer, because like, I think to some extent it's hard not to like, I guess like think about your privilege, check your privilege, like when it is like, I'm lucky enough that I can do both. Like I'm lucky enough that I could put money towards a web series, like on top of that. And like some of it is like sacrifices as far as like life choices. Like other people chose to buy a house and have kids. I chose to not buy a house and not have kids. And like my web series is my kid. And I chose a partner that's like okay with that. And I'm okay with him taking his savings and like putting it into an album. And like that, I think that partnership's important. Like ultimately, like best case scenario, this is an investment in my career that is going to be worth it. But if not, like I had to make a promise to myself that like if nothing happens with the blessing, and stuff already has, so thank God, but like if nothing happened, like I would have been proud to like have had the series and to have put it out on YouTube, which was always the plan, really. Like I kind of always knew. I tried to like put it elsewhere, but like if it goes up on YouTube, I'm going to be able to share this like with my family and my friends and like be proud that I made a product, and like that's it. Because I do think like being results oriented and being like, I made this thing and I'm still not like the biggest director in Hollywood would ruin you. Like it would ruin your soul. And it's also not the point. My fiance's grandpa was a painter, and he would always say art is its own reward. And like, once again, a little woo-woo. Maybe that is kind of steeped in privilege too, but like, I don't know. You have to do what you have to do to like center yourself, I think, like with your mental health. So
yeah, and I think the reality of that is like people who are artists and like have that within them are put in a position to have to make difficult choices.
Yeah.
And I think that's the main thing. I want people to like talk about the privileges that have allowed them so that people know what the reality is.
Yeah.
And also like to help people to be able to make better calculated decisions. What is this going to look like for me? And like, what am I really like up against? And like, I don't know, like that's kind of like.
Yeah, the other thing I want to talk about is that every step of this journey was extremely iterative. Like every like little thing was a building block. So it wasn't like I went and made a web series out the gate. I wrote a script, and sometimes you even take that short film and then you apply to contests and then see if you can get money for that. That didn't happen. So then I worked my day job, and then I like had my budget, and I was like, I'm going to spend this much on my short film. Then once I made the short film, then I used that to apply to grants, and then like made more. And then once I had the series, then I like, you know, took it to the managers, and then now like I'm moving forward in another direction. So like I do think that if you can look at it as fun, like filmmaking is like enjoy the process of like making your short film, and don't think about like, oh, I'm going to be like a movie director, or like I'm going to be like a showrunner of a TV series. Like hopefully, but if not, like you're just making a short film right now. That's all you're doing, and then you'll like take the next step and like use like every step to like build upon the other one.
It's like a very smart way to think about it, and like efficient and effective, and it's like very helpful, I think, to like hear like, oh, that's how they did it.
I think it was kind of like what came out of me calculating what can I afford to do right now, and it's like I can afford to make a little short film, and so then after that's made, then I had the conversation with myself. It was like, okay, what can I do next? So I would like to say that I architected the entire thing, and like now I am exactly where I planned. Not the case. Like very like recalculating and recalibrating every time.
So I guess like the takeaway is like being present, being in the moment, like all of these meditation things and all the like woo-woo things, as you're saying, like there is truth to it. And that was something I wanted to say all the way back when you were talking about the blessing. Like it's not a true story, but like there is truth to it. And I think that's the thing that resonates with everyone. How can art, or how does art subvert these systems, these oppressive systems?
You know, there's a diversity movement in Hollywood, which is fantastic, and we don't want to be tokenized or anything, but I think that this push is like really important to get different stories out there. And I think like specifically Hollywood seems to be like aware that putting more female creators at the helm of projects is an important thing to do. And so seeing Domi Shi as a female writer-director of this gigantic Pixar film, and her take on it, her personal experience like manifested out into this beautiful story that about what it's like to be a woman growing up and trying to figure out your identity and going through puberty. And that's something that I think needs to be out in the world to help little girls and big girls like me and my sister. When we watched it, like we felt really moved by it. My sister just kept saying like art is so important. And I think it helps us to see ourselves in these stories. It helps us to feel less alone. I think that empathy is a really big part in helping people change the world. Fear and violence comes from not seeing people as humans and being able to, you know, do terrible things because you don't think they're equals or you can't relate to them. And so I think like especially minorities like need those humanizing stories to be like, we're not all the same, but we all have similar experiences. And it really is the future of America in any case. Like we're getting more and more diverse by the day. Like we are intermarrying more and more like in the years to come. And like mixing all together and telling different stories and making space for different experiences will just like make the world a better place. The world a better place.
And I think like at the root of like a lot of the oppression is stripping people of their humanity, stripping women, stripping disabled people, stripping anyone who's not white, like and
or male.
Yeah, like you just
Yeah.
all of it. It is stripping people of their humanity, and I think there's this element of like, I'm afraid to lose the privilege that I have. I'm afraid to lose the security that I have. And so, like, I think dehumanizing others is maybe a result of that and not the root of it. I don't know. Like,
I kind of think of this quote I'd heard where it's like, equality feels like oppression to the privileged class. And so it's like feeling like something's going to be taken away from you if other people get equality too. And especially like, you know, dealing with telling an interracial story with the blessing, it's like, you know, people being like, why are there all these Asian women with white guys? And like this fear as if like Asian women are being like taken away from you, or like as if you're entitled to them. And like that's its own problem too, of like feeling like men own women, that women,
or the idea that like, oh, if a white man marries a woman of color, or like, or has children who aren't just white, like that it automatically makes them know how to handle the situations.
Right.
Which I don't, just like when I think of like, when you mentioned that earlier on, I was thinking of like men who are like, but I have a daughter. I was like, that doesn't mean you're not a misogynist. Like,
no, like you have to, like, relationships and love are so like complex, and that's what I find like interesting and fun in writing about them. But they take a lot of conversations, and then like interracial, intercultural ones even more so. Like you have to talk about everything because it's not assumed, and I think that that's good that it's not assumed because a lot of the traditions are backwards. So
because the reality is, people, especially in our culture in America, like we do not talk enough about important things in our relationships. And so I think when it comes to this example of race, it's like, oh, it's a model or it's an example of like, oh, these are things people need to talk about. But I think across the board, like people are not talking about the things that they should be talking about, because it's there aren't cultural scripts for what that should look like, really, because and so it does help. It's like, oh, they're talking about this. Like, what do we not talk about?
1000%.
So, how can people find and support your work?
They can find me on all the social media platforms. Instagram and TikTok are probably the best ways. I have a website called blessingseries.com. And then I also have like my personal filmmaker website at liannkaye.com.
Claiming Representation was created by me, Karina Hiscock, and co-produced by Haley Wang. Our theme music was made by Wish, and you can find a full transcript and additional resources for today's episode on our website, reclaimingrepresentation.com. If you want to support us, please consider making a monthly pledge to our Patreon, or follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Instagram, or TikTok.